south because we don't want the capital of the United States in New York. We don't want it in Philadelphia. We want it closer to Virginia. And Hamilton says, well, you know, I really don't want to do this, but I'll do it if you'll just make all of the state debts a federal debt. Now, a lot of these debts were IOUs to people throughout the United States who, when the Revolutionary Army had come through and said, we need your cows to feed the army. We need your whatever you have to feed the army. We need this for this, we need that. And they would just sign an IOU and give it to the property owner. Well, most of the property owners had realized by this time, we're probably not going to get anything for this, but by golly, we're free. We're not under the oppression of England anymore. We are free. Okay, well, that sounds like a pretty good deal. But here's Hamilton in the background. Hamilton says, here's what I'm going to do. We've made this deal. Then Hamilton gets in touch with his cronies. And as soon as he gets in touch with his cronies, they take off in buggies on horseback and take off in ships going down the eastern seaboard. And they go to all of these people and buy up these debts, these IOUs, at 2 pence. Basically 2 cents on the dollar today. Then they brought them all back and sold them to the federal government for full face value.
Ooh.
Now, I want you to think about this. We're talking about the 1700s, the 18th century. One man made $18 million. One of Hamilton's cronies made $18 million in 1791.
Madison.
I mean, he would have made Bill Gates look like a pauper today with that kind of money.
I'm thinking about Hampton Road right about now.
Well, Aaron Burr was a pretty good shot.
On his head about 3 times.
Aaron Burr was a pretty good shot. And I found it when I went to the Smithsonian, you know, the one thing I can tell you about being around Washington, D.C. is a fantastic place if you're a history nut. Because every weekend I had, I was somewhere looking at something else historical. But went into the Smithsonian and found the dueling set that Burr and Hamilton used on the plains of New Jersey for the duel. And the curator told me, he said, well, you know Hamilton tried to cheat. And I said, well, I'm not surprised. And they said, yeah, but it led to his death. And I said, how appropriate. Because all dueling pistols were supposed to have exact same pounds per square inch. Hamilton had filed his to give him an extra advantage. But what happened with the adrenaline flow as he's coming up, he fires prematurely. So yay, Aaron Burr. Woo. But, and in these notes I'll send you with the, like this one I just told you about the western states that Madison said, I cite my sources. So please check them. George Mason stated, if the western states are to be admitted to the Union, they must be treated as equals and subject to no degrading discrimination. They will have the same pride and other passions which we have, and will either not unite with or will speedily revolt from the Union if they are not in all respects placed in an equal footing with their brethren. That's where the equal footing phrase came from. That is listed in the Basic History of the United States, Volume 2. A compromise resulted in this neutral statement in the Constitution, Article 4, Section 3, new states may be admitted by Congress into this Union, but no new state shall be formed or erected within the jurisdiction of any other state, nor any state be formed by the juncture of 2 or more states or parts of states without the consent of the legislatures of the states concerned, as well as of the Congress. Of course, this was all there when Abraham Lincoln created West Virginia out of the state of Virginia, totally unconstitutional. And he created West Virginia in 1864 to get more electoral votes to make sure he could beat George McClellan for president. So he just created a state so he could have more electoral votes. He knew the election was going to be close.
And he did it without the consent of the,
Without the consent of anybody in Virginia. Yeah. So he violated Article 4, Section 3. But even as bad as the man from Kenya is doing, no one has violated the Constitution in the history of this country more than Abraham Lincoln. There's a reason he has a big marble statue in Washington, D.C. Because he is the great, not emancipator, but he's the great consolidator. He consolidated power. And to prove that nullification was wrong, he killed, now there's a revised estimate, 825,000 people, Americans, to make sure that you didn't try to exercise any of the provisions that I just read. Now, what's a preamble?
It's like introduction.
Declaration of intent, legal definition. Does a preamble have any power? Does it have any validity?
yeah.
Yes.
No. None. Has no power, no validity. It is a declaration of what we intend to do with what follows. And we all know about the preamble to the Constitution. We, the people of the United States, almost everybody knows it, had to memorize it while they were in school, or at least I did, 130 years ago. But it has no power, no validity, and no force of law. It says, here's what we intend to do here. Now, there was a huge argument in the Virginia Ratification Convention because Patrick Henry got all upset, and he asked the first day, June the 5th, I think it was, 1788, he said, by what power did you say we the people? By what power did you say that? You did not have the power to say we the people of the United States. You had no power to do that. Well, I got to give Patrick a lot of credit. He was right and he was wrong in this instance. Because the original preamble said, we the people of, and listed all 13 colonies. But then, near the end of the Constitutional Convention, George Mason looked at that and said, we got a problem. Article 7. We only need 9 states to ratify this thing. And if we've listed all of these states in our preamble, what if some of them don't ratify? We're going to have to go back. We're going to have to change the whole thing. So it was changed to we the people of the United States to cover the ratification. So, I think we got to remain honest in these things. That was not an intent at that time. Although Patrick Henry thought that was the basis, the intent of completing a national government instead of a federal government.
Well, yeah, didn't he say, he said that too. He said if we have a constitution of the people, then there will be a nationalized, centralized government. And that's exactly what we have today.
That's exactly what we have.
Let me interrupt with a question.
Sure.
We're wondering if we should have lunch now, if everybody's hungry, or if we should continue and have lunch after. How would everyone like to do that?
I don't think the pizza's ready.
Well, it'd be ready, it could be ready at 1 if that works.
What would you like to do,
I'm
Mike?
good with whatever you want to do.
Okay. All right, well, let's just go ahead then, and we'll wait for the pizza, and then
we
we'll...
don't have to stop because the lunch people can go get served up and just keep asking questions.
Yeah, you don't get to eat. No, just kidding.
I don't need to eat.
Just kidding.
Yeah,
I'm on this expansion program.
Can I ask one thing? Well, you spoke of Abraham Lincoln for a second. A little bit seemed like out of the timeline, because
you were talking.
It is.
confident, Right.
It is, I just love to tromp on him every chance I get.
Well, and I hadn't heard some of that, but didn't he also tell the federal bankers, hey, we're not interested in you, go away. We're gonna shut down the Federal Reserve right now.
You didn't have the Federal Reserve.
It was the second,
Second bank of the US.
yes, the second chart,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
No, that was removed by Jackson.
That was removed by Andrew Johnson.
Yeah, and Lincoln was issuing greenbacks to finance the war debt.
Yes.
He had only issued them for a short amount of time before he was killed, and then the second he was killed, let's get rid of that program.
Well, but they didn't get rid of the IRS, which he created.
Oh, okay, okay,
Can I ask another question?
Yes.
Sorry.
thank you.
Were you answered?
Excuse me?
Were you answered?
Yes, thank you. I've got
Okay.
a few things to
I
read
just,
on.
don't let me stop until I answer your question or tell you a lie.
No.
Just kidding,
It's
just
like
kidding.
Hamilton,
Just
you
kidding.
quoted Hamilton, you quoted that he wasn't this great guy, and he had these
Right.
quotes. And then he had these great quotes, which everybody can agree upon. So it's like we get handed, oh, here's this awesome sales pitch, and then you find out the details. And Abraham Lincoln has these details, and Hamilton has these details, and Washington, you think he's this.
Well, I'm gonna get to,
So thank you.
I'm gonna get to
for
Mr.
sharing all
A.
these Ideas.
he's one of my favorite subjects. But it's really, really critical that we understand that the Bill of Rights had a preamble. Because this Bill of Rights, as was submitted to James Madison, the 13 states, and even North Carolina and Rhode Island, even though they weren't in, they sent recommendations for a Bill of Rights in anticipation of coming in. So they sent 212 recommendations to Thomas Jefferson for a Bill of Rights. Jefferson pared them down to 12. And you're not going to feel bad if you get this wrong. But what was the most numerous? What amendment ended up being the most numerous one requested by all of the states?
Sovereignty.
Pardon me?
Sovereignty. Sovereignty.
No, actually, what is now the 10th Amendment was the most submitted amendment to Madison. I don't know why he made it
Oh,
10th.
then she's right.
Sovereignty, state sovereignty. I'm sorry. You're right. What was this? What was this?
Come on, give credit where credit's due.
Good job, Ben.
What was the second most submitted?
Right there.
No. Some colonies didn't even have that in their state constitution. But there's a reason for that. And some states required everyone to be armed in their constitutions. One constitution, the state of Pennsylvania, actually required that everyone take their pistol to church.
Jody's still complying.
Now, there is a reason for that, and that is that in Pennsylvania, everyone, like Sweden, was issued a firearm from the government, and they didn't want them left at home on Sunday because that's when people were breaking into houses and stealing their guns. So the government said, you must bring your gun to church on Sunday.
It wasn't to.
But it made
Sort out religious
church a pretty safe place to be on Sunday morning, didn't it? But the Second Amendment is inextricably, and if you read into this and you really begin to see it, is so much into our founders' distaste and abhorrence of the standing army. The Second Amendment is so much about that. And everything they've said has come to pass. A standing army will destroy the country economically. And we've all got these boogeymen that they've all created out there, but I can tell you in my military career, we create boogeymen so we'll have somebody to fight.
So you'll have a reason to exist.
Yes. So, and it's like Scott Tipton voting to fund Obamacare so he'd have something to run against this year.
There was a friend of mine who had Saddam Hussein in his sights with a sniper for 2 days. Sir, if he's our biggest enemy, can I put a bullet in his ear? No, you cannot. We have
Actually,
orders.
we didn't find Saddam. The Kurds found Saddam, and they traded him over to us. But that may be true there, but before that
A
happened.
few years earlier.
But, oh yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, we created him, we created Noriega in Panama, we created almost everything. We create these monsters so we'll have something to fight.
So Scott Tipton voted to fund Obamacare?
Oh, yes. He and 87 other Republicans in the House.
Where's that at?
And what vote was that?
That was the vote they made back when there was the big scare about shutting down the government. They voted to fund the government, and in that was Obamacare.
Something else that Scott Tipton has voted for.
Well, that would be a debt extension. Was that the debt extension vote?
No, not this last one. Remember when they were all
Well, the
yelling
first
at?
one.
Or the first one.
The first debt extension included funding for
Obamacare, funding Obamacare.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
that's Jeff
Would you
pointed out to me.
break down the 10th Amendment and tell us what that looks like?
Can you give me a minute? I'm going to get to it.
Yes,
I'm going to get to it.
Okay.
Now, this preamble, I was telling you about those, this preamble is very, very critical because it is a declaration of intent. So here's what they intended to do with the 10 amendments that's called the Bill of Rights. Every one of those amendments changed something in the Constitution, which our Supreme Court justices do not recognize today. They do not recognize that certain tenets of that, and the 10th Amendment, which I will get into, sovereignty, I'm sorry, we'll get into that, was because the founders believed that the 10th Amendment shut down the necessary and proper clause, redefined the supremacy clause, and stopped the the commerce clause, and stopped the general welfare clause. They believed the 10th Amendment did that. And how many times has the Supreme Court cited that to hit us all with since? The 10th Amendment negated those in the eyes of the founders. So here is the preamble to the Bill of Rights. Now you won't find this in any school books either. Congress of the United States begun and held at the city of New York on Wednesday the 4th of March 1789. The conventions of a number of the states, having at the time of their adopting the Constitution expressed a desire, now listen carefully, in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers, that further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added, and as extending the ground of public confidence in the government will best ensure the beneficent ends of its institution. These are declaratory and restrictive clauses on the government, the 10 Bill of Rights. So you had the first, which was, let me see if I can go to the one here. Let me see. Now, let you folks take a little breather here for a second while I find what I'm looking for. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm ready to start back.